Julie, as a former member of this national team, what was your reaction when you heard this news break on Friday night?
Sebastian, my reaction, of course, from a player, when I put my player hat on, was I was saddened by it because I think these women deserve the world. When I look at our battles with U.S. soccer, going back decades now. But when I put my reporter analyst hat on, I'm not entirely surprised by it because we know the court of public opinion is very different, and we've always known this, than the court of legal opinion. And it's why I'm saddened they weren't able to get to the table. You just never know what's going to happen in a court case. You never know how a judge is going to rule, case in point. And I think the players had the opportunity to try and do some type of settlement with U.S. soccer, especially given the PR predicament U.S. soccer was in over the last couple months. And obviously they lose some leverage here with this ruling.
Something we've learned, Julie, in the 32-page ruling is that representatives of the women's national team rejected a similar deal to what the men's national team had back in 2016. They did so in favor of a collective bargaining agreement with guaranteed contracts. Why would they do that, Julie?
Well, it's interesting that the judge in these 32 pages spent a lot of time laying out that negotiating process and essentially saying, to your point, that they had the chance in what was put in front of them by U.S. Soccer to sign a pay-to-play agreement, and they chose for the CBA structure that provided more guarantee. And the reason, the history of that, actually, Sebastian, is that we've always realized that we were not bringing in outside income from our professional club teams to the amount, of course, that the men make. The men were making often millions of dollars from their professional club programs. And on the women's side, as we know, traditionally, women's professional soccer in its infancy was not able to pay as much. And so there was no security on the women's professional side. And so we needed our security on the national team side. And so from the early days, we fought for injury protection. We fought for severance, maternity leave, nanny support, child care support, insurance. I mean, all these things that often the men were getting from the professional clubs, we needed to get from U.S. Soccer. And so, it appears from what the judge laid out that the women were unwilling to give up some of those guarantees. They did want to go to a pay-to-play model with some guarantees, and U.S. Soccer shut that down. So the judge essentially ruling, hey, look, you chose this CBA model. You can't now say we would have been paid more had we taken the men's model.
Julie, let's talk about some of the reaction that we've seen in the days since. We've heard from some of the players, I think defiant, a good way to describe their tone on social media. But one of the reactions that jumped out to me the most is from a presidential candidate, Joe Biden. He tweeted about this. He tweeted a message of support for the women's national team, but he also tweeted directly at U.S. Soccer, and he said this: equal pay now, or else when I'm president, you can go elsewhere for World Cup funding. Julie, the players seem to have lost momentum here. Did the Federation gain any momentum?
Well, judging by that tweet, not really. I mean, I think this is the predicament that U.S. Soccer finds itself in, and they've known this for a long time, which is why I think there were so many of us that were hopeful, again, that this would have settled, because they realized that it's a no-win situation for U.S. Soccer. And I think they're correct in that assessment. Even though they won the court case, or in large part they won the court case, with the compensation piece of it being dropped, they know that they are not winning the public sentiment battle. And this will continue. And you're seeing by some of these tweets that it obviously is not going to go away, which I think is further incentive for U.S. Soccer, especially given it's a new look U.S. Soccer with Cindy Parlow now, the president in charge, with Will Wilson, the new CEO, to go to the team and say, and really take the lead here and say, let's figure out this relationship. Let's mend this relationship. Let's start trusting again, because boy, is that fractured, and they know it from a public sentiment side. They know it from a sponsorship side. And so I think you're going to see another outreach. I hope you see another outreach by both parties to say, let's sit down and figure this out.
What's next from the player side then, Julie? Where does the women's national team go from here?
Well, immediately Molly Levenstein, who is their spokesperson, sent out a statement saying, we're going to appeal. We absolutely are going to appeal. And whether they can appeal right now with a few of those issues, as you pointed out, Sebastian, at the top, still going to trial, remains to be seen. But here's the thing. Even if they do appeal, U.S. Soccer could say to them, look, if you want to sit at the table and actually settle here, you're going to need to drop the appeal. So maybe they're appealing to have a little bargaining chit at their side. But I think that they clearly have lost some leverage. And I am hopeful that it doesn't turn out to be another 2-year-long process with appeal that ends up going to trial. And instead, again, you can get these two parties to come together. And I would even argue, Sebastian, that you take the men and the women and you bring them together. The men are fighting for their CBA as well. And this is an exhausting, having lived this process, this is an exhausting process with CBA negotiations. It takes a ton of time, a ton of energy, and it drains resources in every 4 years fighting for a new CBA. And with the two teams and the two different sides, the men and the women, constantly fighting back and forth in terms of their CBA and what they're getting, it's never ending, it feels like. So what I have said all along is, why not get those two to agree to some percentage of the pot, not the whole pot, because obviously the Soccer Federation has to fund a lot of different programming, an equal percentage of the pot, split it amongst them, right? And then those two teams decide how they want to be paid. They decide their structure. They decide how it looks like. U.S. Soccer looks good because they're paying both teams equally, and they're able to fund their other programming. But I'm hopeful that that's where the women and the men get to, so that you can start growing the game together instead of fighting over it. I think that's where we all need to get to.
Well, thank you very much for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming, premium content, and let's not forget as well, ESPN FC 7 days a week, subscribe to ESPN+.